Welcome to the Anthropology 341. This is our virtual worlds, or more easily described as digital anthropology. Given the changes that we've seen, globally in the last year or so, due to COVID, but also, as we'll see in this class, way before COVID ever, was a thought, even before SARS. There was all these discussions that were occurring about the changes in terms of how people were becoming more digitally integrated, how digital aspects of of technology in the world around us were changing the way we interact, or were they changing the way we interact? All of these are part and parcel of what we're going to be looking at this semester, the social impacts of basically everything that's digital that we can sort of get our hands on. This is a very, very broad subject. We're looking at it very specifically when the idea of social, i.e. group. Darren's supposed to be working on a psychology class that would be somewhat, sort of parallel this. So would look at, for example, the impacts on the individual, which is a ton of material out. So I'm not, whatever, we'll get into that. So anyway, so this class is looking at the anthropology of basically digital. And so in that context, the texts that we've got are sort of interesting because they reflect a lot of these different sort of perspectives. So let me go over that first, and I'll get into, what the course looks like in terms of structure. First is Bolersdorf's. He's a well-known anthropologist. His original work was looking at gender identity in Indonesia. And out of that, he apparently got interested in the whole idea of digital ways in which people were communicating. And out of that, he got involved very early on what's called Second Life, which is a digital world platform that we're going to spend a fair amount of time looking at. And he got into it very early on when it was first, had first sort of developed in 2005, 2006. And he very quickly realized that what was going on and wasn't entirely a digital platform, was actually very, very similar, and in fact couldn't be distinguished from what you'd see within a group of people in what you might call reality. And so he decided what he was going to do is actually take a look at this in terms of the anthropology, if you would, being an anthropologist, looking at how people interact, how they behave, and their perception of digital realities. And that became the basis of this particular book. It's absolutely fascinating for two reasons. One, his timing was perfect. He was there just as it was starting to develop. So he was there as people were sort of figuring out what this was going to be, and he was there watching that. Secondly, is that unbeknownst to anyone, and certainly him, is in many ways, as we'll see during the semester, what was going on in Second Life and other virtual worlds, but Second Life's the most famous, in the early part, say 2006 to 2010, 11, actually became a precursor, if you would, for what you see with digital media, which of course shows up at the end of that. Facebook, Twitter, and all these things don't start up until the 2012, 13, 14, such like that. So that was such much shorter lifespan so far. And yet what you find is the whole issue of identity, being immersed in a digital world, not being able to distinguish between the digital and the real, how important it was, and all these other aspects that he found that were visible and actually fairly accessible in Second Life, turned out to also be what we see now occurring across all these different digital platforms. And so the Second Life research is really handy because in many ways, a lot of the conclusions that occurred with that, at least I would argue, equally apply and should be studied when you're looking at the larger issue, the impacts of Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or whatever. There's not, in the way that you look at it, the way that people view these things, the reality of them. And again, if you want to think of it in immediate context, the whole issue of the attack on the Capitol building. It can be seen if you understand how Second Life operates and how people looked at the digital and how real it was, then using digital discussions to do something like that make a lot more sense. And I think that's one of the reasons this book is so incredibly useful, not only just for what it's talking about, but if while you're reading it, you actually sort of extrapolate that into the world that you're familiar with social media, which of course didn't exist back then. It's very readable. It's quite interesting. I think you'll enjoy it. I would strongly recommend, as one of the side effects, is it would be worth your while to go and log into Second Life. It's free, and just sort of take a little while, a half an hour, poking around, sort of getting a sense of what it is looking at. It's much prettier now than it was back in 2008. But it really hasn't changed at all, which is fascinating because if you're, if you think of the games and the other things that people play and use in the digital realm, whether it be, World of Warcraft or anything, Fortnite even, you suddenly realize that this sucker was around from 2006 and it's still going strong in 2021. And that's sort of mind blowing when you consider how quickly what was popular disappears. If you think about what it was that you were playing or using 6 or 8 years ago, is it still there? My guess would be probably not. And yet this is still around, working on 20 years now, which is pretty surreal. The second is basically a really good history of how social media has developed and the logic behind it, and how it's so basically controlled by a very small number of companies and what their agendas are. So that it's actually sort of got a crappy title because it's actually a much more interesting, in some ways pretty scary book than the title would sort of suggest. So it's a very useful thing. And if you're ever going to get involved in any way, looking or analyzing or even manipulating social media, this is a necessity because it goes into, also as with Boulder Stars, it goes into a fair amount of discussion about why has social media become so powerful, and why is it so compelling to, basically now a majority of the world's population. The third is sort of this whole going on more what you might call a social psychology shift on this. And this is looking at the whole issue of, and again, it's a very interesting subset. He's one of the few people who have actually looked at this, is the whole issue of self-imaging in social media and how dominant that's become, which was never intended with social media. It never occurred to people that social media would become the platform for self, imaging and to a certain extent self-validation, which is what STAR gets into. And so that in that regard, it's really handy. It's also a very good example of sort of the current tone that a lot of the studies have, which is sort of the social implications and the dangers of social media, which are both very real, but also oftentimes get sort of hyped up, and it's hard to sort what's going on with a lot of that. And that segues into the last, and I do want you to go as soon as possible and at least look at Miller's research site at University College London. They've been doing a study since, I'm going to say, last 4 or 5 years at least, if not longer, looking at why people post on Facebook, and then also now other social media. And so he actually got a grant, and they built this enormous project looking at different locations around the world, different societies, and actually taking anthropologists and put them in these different societies and seeing how people in those places use the same media. And what Miller's research really does an elegant job of pointing out is that you might have the platform Facebook, which is run by Zuckerberg and all those guys. It's got the guys that code Facebook and the things that you can do on Facebook. But what you find, as he found out, is there's people in, for example, in Brazil and Chile, both South American countries right next to each other, use Facebook totally differently. People in England use Facebook totally differently than they use it in Italy. People in even different parts of China use social media totally differently. So this idea that Facebook basically shapes how we use social media is not what they found out. What they found out is exactly the opposite. Facebook is a tool, just like your cell phone is a tool, and how you use it varies from group to group. So his argument is basically that societies and groups use social media, shape social media to the needs and the agendas they've had. In that context, then the media then also shapes their agendas. So it's a sort of a catch-22. It moves you, you move it, and you end up in this dynamic interrelationship, which is a big part of what they're looking at. And they've got some absolutely fascinating, there's some beautiful short videos they've got that I want you over the semester to watch. Very interesting, very short, very well done, that actually talk about the comparative visual differences between two different places and how they use the exactly same social platform in very different ways. And it makes you look at the issue of like stores work in terms of selfies and such really differently when you realize that a lot of the discussion we see, especially in the United States, is so ethnocentric and it's so American centric that it tends to oftentimes really skew the sort of more general issues about the digital world and the digital realities that we'll be getting into. So Miller's stuff is fun to look at. It's really interesting. Anyone that you've got that wonders, why you're taking this class, send them that link. They'll figure it out in a second, I think. So anyway, so that's the text. I've got this syllabus up here. Let's very quickly segue into what you got to do this semester. Sorry about that. The main part of the semester, and this is what I've been doing for the last couple of years in all my classes, are what I'm calling now critical thinking exercises. And critical thinking exercises are basically a series of analyses that you're going to do during the semester. So as we go through a chunk of material, these modules, after 1 or 2 modules, then I want you to do a critical thinking exercise, one of these exercises. And there's a template that I've got here that actually says what I want you to do in terms of the structure. I'm not going to give you the topic. If someone really is desperate, I'll give you some ideas, but I don't have something I'm looking for. What I want you to look at is take some aspect of what we've covered in one part of those modules, something that really hits your fancy or really struck you, or something that maybe you're familiar with, and look at it in more detail than we're looking at it in the class. And that becomes what your critical thinking exercises are. And that's why they're called that. I want you to look at something that we're covering and critically analyze it and to go into more detail about what you think about it. So if you wanted to, it's sort of maybe a defended opinion paper. I don't know how you want to phrase it. I call them critical thinking exercises. So as we're going through the material, what you might want to do, and I'd strongly recommend it, both the PowerPoint, the lectures that we've got, and the material and the readings, is as you find something that you really find intriguing, that you want to know something more about, that we're just going over really quickly, and we're going over a lot of this stuff really quickly. Use that as your critical thinking exercise. If you're totally lost, then I would suggest one of 2 things: either something that you're interested in. So for example, if you're into digital gaming or some aspect or some particular social media platform, or the way, particular, say, Pinterest groups or something, or Reddit or something that you're involved in, see how that ties into some of these and actually build off of that. So you're building off of your interest. If not that, then what you might think in terms of relevant to either another course or your career, and then do that. So give yourself some reason for doing the assignment rather than just, I got to get this done because it's Bordner's class. You're going to have to do a sort of a giant version of this, which are called a presentation or blog post. This is either a PowerPoint presentation, or it can be a blog post. In other words, a post that you would put on your website. And I would recommend that if you do not have a website, get them. I use WordPress, which is free. And you can see it on the top where you got the link to my website. And it's useful. Websites, as we're going to do somewhere in the semester, are something that you should have just so you understand what they are and what they mean, and how they present you in a different way than social media platforms, who are controlled by other agencies like say Facebook. There's going to be a number of videos and such during the semester. For most of the videos that I have, I will actually give you a set of questions. And so when you're watching the video, read the questions first, watch the video, and then as you're going through the video, when you're finished with it, answer the questions. That gives you a reason to watch the video. And so I want to see your answers. You're not going to get graded on the length of the answer, but I do want you to put a little bit of thought into how you answer the questions that I've posed. I think especially in this class, some of the videos, I'm very pleased with a lot of the videos I've got in this class. Some of them are, I won't say they're freaky, but I wouldn't watch them late at night because it might give you a nightmare, depending on how good your imagination is. So I think you'll find some of them really pretty, maybe surreal would be the best way to phrase it. Attendance in the COVID online world, especially in this class, attendance just means that you keep up with the course material. If at the end of the semester you haven't handed in any reaction papers and you try to knock all those suckers out at the end of the semester, that is, it's pretty much sort of a waste of your time and mine. One is I still have to read them and go over them. Secondly is the videos are designed to be watched when we're talking about that material. So they're giving you illustrations and other sort of visual, dialogue that basically ties into otherwise, which is just a bunch of text that we're going over. So you need to watch them when they're assigned. Don't just screw around and wait till the end of the semester. So that will ding, things like that will ding your attendance. So get your work done on time. If it takes you an extra couple of days to get the critical thinking, oops, sorry, I forgot to change it. Critical thinking assignments done, that's fine. Don't worry about that. But get them done in sequence. It's incredibly easy to procrastinate, as most of you are probably aware. It's incredibly easy to procrastinate in an online class. And the problem is, of course, is it still has due dates and you still have to get stuff on time. So it has the illusion that you can do it when you've got the time. And of course, you know, you guys all know you don't have the time. You don't have any time. So you just got to make the time. The only way you do that is keeping it on the schedule. So just, you know, do it when it's assigned. It's just the logical way to handle it. And here's your, you know, the format that I want you to use. Okay, here's the semester. If you notice, there's a bunch of modules. You guys, I don't know, you're going to be able to see a couple of them. Yeah, I'm going to try to send this to you as a YouTube link, so you get this video at least. But you should, by Monday, you should have access to your courses. That's, I think, how they're setting up this semester. So through Canvas. Be sure, and as soon as possible, the minute that you've got access, you know, make sure that you can get access to all your classes. Don't wait until, you know, Wednesday or Friday and then basically, oh, I better check in and see what's happening, and suddenly realize that some sort of crash and burn occurred and you can't get in. That's gonna just stack into a mess. So do it when you're supposed to do it. And so here's the modules we're going over. These are different themes that we're covering. Here's the topics that we're covering in the different modules. These are the dates that the modules take place, and they're all tagged, so they should show up. Hopefully, they should show up in your calendar for the course. And then these are the assignments in terms of what I want you to do. So you know, it should be pretty straightforward. You know, knock on wood. You know, this worked out last semester, so we'll see how it plays. I don't see any particular issue coming in. If there is, by all means, let me know. I'm going to try to set up a open sort of office Zoom session, probably Monday and Wednesdays, 12:30 to 1:30. I'll send you guys all the notice to that in terms of an invite. And that's just going to be, I'm just going to have the camera on. I'm going to have Zoom open. So if you want to come in and ask a question or, you know, have comments or something outside and above and beyond what we cover during the course, feel free. That's what it's for. I would also point out that, just as a note, this is an area that I do research in, but it's not an area, in fact, none of the things that I do research in are things that we actually cover in the courses here. So one of the problems almost all students have at Chaminade, and I think this is typical of all universities, is they're really reticent to ask the professor why, you know, or I don't understand this, or what the hell are you talking about? Or, you know, I don't agree. And you have to remember that you learn more when you don't understand something and you try to work it through than when you just go, okay, and it's going and it's gone. So by all means, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if something doesn't make sense, then speak up. If you're concerned about speaking up, then if, you know, we're going through the Zoom session, then use chat. I'm pretty good about checking the chat stuff. Some people seem to like that better. I'm not for the type of stuff we're covering, my ego isn't attached to it. So I'm not going to get upset if you go, well, you know, Bordner, you know, why did you say that? That doesn't make any sense. Fine. You know, you have to remember that at some point when you're taking courses, if someone like me is presenting the material, it's my interpretation of the material. It's not like it's written in stone. To be honest, if it was, I wouldn't be here. I'd be making a lot of money, you know, on CNN or Fox or something like that. So you have to remember in that context that I learn more and I get more out of it when you ask questions, because then I know that you're not only paying attention, but you're thinking through the material. And so it works out better for all of us if it is a dialogue, and especially in a course like this. You know, you guys are all immersed in social media. You use some aspects of social media a lot more than I do. I study it, but I don't necessarily use it. I have a Twitter account that I think I check once every 6 months. Instagram, I got an Instagram account, but geez, I don't even know if I've looked at it last year too. You know, so I study this stuff, but to be honest, that type of social media is what I'm interested in. One of your compatriots for senior thesis last year did a really good study of how Tinder's used as a form of self-identity versus more of a social matchup dating service, which is a really good example of someone who is engaged in the media and has a very different view of it. I would have never thought of that, but it was a superb study, and she did a really good job. So, you know, you guys all have different types of insights and different stuff to add. to this whole, sort of discussion. So by all means, not only stay engaged and keep up with the material, but put your 2 cents in. You've got something to say, even if you don't think you do. Even if you're just asking, I don't understand. If there's something that we're going over and you don't understand, I can guarantee someone else is also clueless. So by all means, remember that the course, you're paying for it. And if you don't ask questions or you don't put your 2 cents in when you've got something to say, then, at some point you're not getting your money's worth. So, so on that note, I guess we'll stop this. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I needed to cover. Oh, I'll probably figure it out later. So we're going to be doing Zoom for the next week or two. The university is still trying to figure out what they're up to. The contagion rate is still fairly high. And so, it just doesn't seem worthwhile taking a risk, and especially in an online class, we don't have any reason to be together physically. I am up in my office. This is where I do most of my work. So if you want to come by, I'm going to be here. And like I said, I will try to set up a Zoom either today or tomorrow. I'll set up a Zoom sort of access portal that'll be available during the semester for probably Monday, Wednesday, 12:30. Now it's going to be available for everyone in all the classes. So by all means, stop by or check it out or whatever. So take care, and we'll see you during the semester. I think you'll find it an interesting class.